Hello lovely people, as you may have noticed, a decade's just ended, so I'm here to do the end of the decade tag.
Sophie Vlogs.
First of all, I have a cold, as you might be able to tell. I've got some tea, in case you wonder what tea. Theodora green tea, peppermint and New Zealand kiwi fruit to get me through, because I still want to do my day of mass filming, which I had scheduled in. So if you see me in lots of videos with a cold wearing this dress, don't worry. I've not been sick for months. I'm just doing a mass filming. I was tagged by Charlie over at Charles Heathcote. I love Charlie's channel. I think he is lovely, but also has cutting wit, which is great. I'll leave a link to him down below. This tag was created by Brews and Reviews, who is another person I'm subscribed to, who I also think is lovely. She has excellent taste in books, so I'll also leave a link to her channel down below. Essentially, we're splitting the decade into three sections: 2010 to 2013, 2014 to 2016, and then 2017 to 2019. And we're going to answer these questions for the following for each section. What I'm going to do is, I'm initially going to answer the questions: how much did you read, what genre did you read the most, what were your favourite books and authors. I'm going to do that first for each one, and then at the end I'm going to talk generally about, is there a book you wish you'd read during these time periods, or do you have any regrets about your reading during these time periods? I'm going to do that as like an addendum at the end, because I don't know how much my voice can take, so we're just going to carry on. I'm going to put this down because this is too hot for now to drink. So I'm going to start off with the period of 2010 to 2013. This is the period when I was doing my A-levels, and I think I just started university in this period. I did not log all of my academic reading. I logged like the main texts, but I didn't like put all of my, I read this journal, because, that's pedantic. So into how much I read: 2010 I read 33 books, 2011 I read 34 books, 2012 I read 29 books, and 2013 I read 49 books. I think the genre I most read during this time was probably murder mysteries, because this is when I first discovered Agatha Christie. My nanny, before she passed away, she had a really big collection of Agatha Christie books, and I used to go over, help my dad out when he went to like take her shopping, stuff like that. And what we'd do is that she would recommend me like 3 books at a time, so I'd be like, okay, start with your favourite 3. She'd give me her favourite 3, and then like each time it would be like, okay, which other ones do you really like? So got really into Agatha Christie, and it was a really nice way to bond with my nanny, which was lovely. My favourite books and authors in this time period: so in 2010 I began probably reading Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett I have read before that, but this is when I began I'm going to read Terry Pratchett from the beginning in publishing order, which I'm still doing because I'm eking it out because I'm taking my time with it. I also read my first Margaret Atwood. I read Handmaid's Tale when I was in A-levels, because my my A-level English teacher it was really cool actually, he had like his office in the 6th form. He was like, there's this shelf that was full of books, and it was like, as long as he's in and the office is open, you can pop in any time, you can borrow any books, you just have to return them. So I read a lot of stuff that was actually, now I realise, it's all these like foundational texts. So I read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, I read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, I read The World's Wife by Caroline Duffy. So all of these books which are by these really big authors, I now realise that he was doing this way of like, okay, you need to start prepping for university, why don't you start getting used to some of these authors that you might be talking about at university, which is really great. I also got really into Tennessee Williams. We studied A Streetcar Named Desire, and then when I wrote my personal statement for university, I read a whole bunch of Tennessee Williams, because you kind of like, the teachers were like, oh, you need to like talk about what you like to read, and I was like, well, I want to sound like I am literary, but also like not like everyone else. So like Tennessee Williams was the guy that I chose, and I do really like Tennessee Williams plays. I would like to see them performed, but yeah, I just got really into Tennessee Williams that year. 2011, that can't be right. Oh no, I wrote a book name down wrong, sorry. 2011, some highlights are Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I love that book, it's still one of my favourite books. And The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I got so into Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I've read quite a few of his books now, but that was like, I fell in love with that book. 2012 is when I started university. I read Beowulf, which I loved. I read my favourite Jeanette Winterson's, so I read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit when I studied it at A-level, and then I started reading Jeanette Winterson for fun in my first year of university. I also read all of the available books of A Song of Ice and Fire, and I specifically read them all in like my first like couple of weeks of university, because I vividly remember like you turn up for your first day, you move into halls, and you're like, not everyone is here yet, I don't know if I should go say hello, and I just remember like being in my room reading A Song of Ice and Fire and being like, I'll go out in a minute, it'll be fine. In 2013, I really kicked off like my classical studying, so like I read the Iliad, I read the Odyssey, stuff like that. Plus, I picked up Catherine and Valenti's Fairyland series, which I absolutely adore. I read Frankenstein. I like set myself like a summer reading challenge that year, so like over the summer break I had books that I wanted to read for fun that were not for my course, and like Frankenstein was one of those, and I really liked it. And also I discovered C.P. Cavafy, because I did a module in modern Greek literature, and he's one of my favourite poets, and I discovered him that year. It was a pretty good reading time. A lot of those books I've mentioned are books that I did study, so I did less just like reading for fun, but I think that's just because I was like living. Okay, so 2014 to 2016, we're about to kick into more book reading. I'm just gonna have some tea. So 2014 was my final year of uni, and then going forward from there, I was unemployed for a bit after graduating because like house moving, job hunting, etc. And then this is the time period where I like got my first proper job. I started making Booktube videos. I started commuting. So 2014 I read 101 books because I had 6 weeks to do fun reading and I took that time. 2015 I read 86 books, and 2016 I read 91 books. My favourite books and authors in that time were, so when it comes to genre most read, I think maybe the genre most read might have been more like YA type stuff. This is when I kind of got into YA. I didn't really read a lot of YA. I read like middle grade when I was younger, and I feel like I kind of like skipped YA a bit, and then I got really into it like when I was just graduating from uni. So in 2014 I read Genevieve Cogman, The Invisible Library, which is a series that I'm still reading and still loving. I read Aristotle and Dante, which destroyed me. I started just like weeping in my kitchen, which was great. I started getting into comics because my friend Mark started lending me comics. I read Divergent by Veronica Roth. I don't know how I'd feel about Divergent if I reread it now, but at the time it was one of the first. Oh, along with the Hunger Games, that's another one in this time period. So like Divergent and Hunger Games, I read both of them in that year, and that's kind of what got me into like YA, that sort of thing. I had read Twilight actually when I was in school, and I got really into Twilight, but I didn't really dabble in much YA, which I find weird now. Also, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. That was the first Ursula K. Le Guin book I read, and I read it because I had heard of her as an author, but I had no idea that I was just going to love her so much, and I find her so interesting. I also read Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. Guy Gavriel Kay is one of my favourite fantasy authors. Tigana is a book that my parents talk about a lot, and it was nice to just read it myself. In 2015, some highlights were A Thousand Nights by E.K. Johnston. Absolutely love that retelling of Scheherazade. I have a whole thing about Scheherazade. Rivers of London book by Ben Aronovich, which is another series which I still enjoy reading now. Chaos Walking by Patrick Ness. Yes, Patrick Ness. I got so into that. The Split Worlds by Emma Newman. Just Emma Newman is another author. This is essentially, 2015 is a year that I read a lot of authors that I still really enjoy reading now. They have ongoing series which have been going from then till now that I still absolutely love. So Emma Newman has a sci-fi series out now which I love, but I initially got into her through her fantasy series, which is Split Worlds, which is like a Fae-inspired book, which I definitely recommend. Also my friend Leah's Dudish. I think this is the year that we became friends, but she gave me a load of book recommendations which actually were really vital in me getting back into reading. I'm not sure if I would connect with all of them as much as I connected with them at the time. Stuff like Rainbow Rowell and Far From You by Tess Sharp and stuff like this. But they were like so key in me getting back into reading for fun and like knowing where to start reading for fun, because I was doing a lot of reading for fun that was still quite like academic stuff you'd study, whereas she gave me a lot of recs that were like, these are good books that people like right now that are current, which was great fun. 2016, I started reading more non-fiction for fun. So I got a book called, it's called Red by Jackie Collis Harvey. and it's The Secret History of the Redhead, and it's all about red hair and like genetically in art, in literature, stuff like that. That was really interesting. But I also picked up like Maya Angelou for the first time. In fiction world, I read Natasha Pulley, who I really liked, and Jodie Taylor. I started reading The Chronicles of St. Mary's, which is another series that I still really like. And Rainer Maria Rilke. I read my first Rainer Maria Rilke. I read Letters to a Young Poet, but also I have now read more of his poetry and I really like him. Moving on to 2017 to 2019. These are the years that I spent at my current job. So I've been commuting to my current job and I've been doing Booktube regularly. Both of those things have sort of combined to mean that I now read faster than I used to, and I read more than I used to. So in 2017 I read 160 books. In 2018, I read 127 books, and in 2019, as of recording this, and I am recording this on New Year's Eve, so I don't see this going up anymore, I read 201 books, which is wild. It's absolutely, I don't know. The genre I've most read, I've been getting really back into fantasy and sci-fi, I think, and both like classic older, but also like more contemporary stuff, so that's been really fun. So, in 2017, some standout authors for me were Catherine Arden. I started the Winter Night trilogy, Isabel Greenberg, so 100 Nights of Hero, stuff like that. Sappho, I properly read Sappho. I'd had like studied extracts of Sappho, but I actually properly read just like a book of Sappho's poetry. Also, Bruce Springsteen's autobiography is what got me really back into reading autobiographies, which was really great. And Fire McFarlane, I just really liked Fire McFarlane in that year. In 2018, I read like Gentleman's Guide by Mackenzie Lee, which I really enjoyed, and then stuff like Orlando by Virginia Woolf. That really stuck with me. Has given me lots to think about. I think it's my favourite Virginia Woolf, even though it's like atypical of her style. Circe by Madeline Miller, and then also stuff like Fingersmiths by Sarah Waters. I've never read any Sarah Waters before, and I still haven't actually read any more, but I would like to. Eat Up by Ruby Tando was a real non-fiction highlight examining like your relationship to food and all these other things. And also I read Becky Chambers for the first time, and I love her Wayfarer series. And then in 2019, I feel like middle grade has been a real standout for me this year. So the Bronte Metalstone by Jacqueline Moriarty, Popkin and Stubbs by Sophie Green, Malamander by Tom something, and then like Frost Heart by Jamie Littler. There's been a lot of really good middle grade this year, which I also quite like because I do children's magazines as my job, so understanding writing for children better is something that is useful to me. And then also I read The Raven Cycle, I read Evelyn Hugo, I did a reread of Harry Potter. We have some feelings on J.K. Rowling, but they are separate from our feelings for Harry Potter, even though Harry Potter is not flawless. Also some other highlights. How to Survive the Plague by David France is one of the best non-fiction books I've ever read, and I read it this year, and it is immensely powerful and immensely sad, but it is a very good read to understand better how activists and scientists work together to defeat the AIDS epidemic. Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett was a really great piece of like fantasy, which I loved. City of Brass, Lord of the Rings, Isaac Asimov, all of these things and more I got really into this year, which I loved. So for both of these, books I wish I read and regret sections, I don't feel like I have a huge amount to say because I don't really have any regrets. The thing is like during the years that I was at like university and stuff and I didn't read as much, like I don't regret that because I worked bloody hard. I didn't read a lot for fun because I was doing loads of secondary source reading for my essays and stuff like this, and also just like trying to get through it because university is a really hard time. The more I am out of university, the more I look back on who I was at university and identify that I was kind of struggling a lot and I just didn't really acknowledge it. So like if you're in university and you beat yourself up for not reading as much, like chill out guys. You're doing the best you can and it's a hard time. I think there are definitely books which if I had read at certain times in my life I might have resonated with differently, and I feel that I sometimes talk about that in my reviews. There are books which I'm like, oh, if I read this a few years ago I would have loved it a lot more than I do now, or vice versa. Maybe I need to reread this in a few years and I'll like it more than I do now. But again, I don't feel like I can really regret that because I've read so many good books that have, and even the books I've hated have still informed me and stuff. So like I don't really have any regrets or books that I wish I'd read because like I'm doing okay. Then the final bit is, when you've answered the above questions for every section, there are 2 more general questions. Number 1, where did you find Booktube? Did it change your reading habits? And number 2, how do you think your reading has changed over the last decade? I'm sort of going to discuss these together. I did mention in my little bits that I've just done that you've just watched. The thing about Booktube is that I started doing Booktube also when I started having a proper job. So this coincided with having an income meant that I could buy more books. Previously I did a lot more rereading because I was a child and I had no income. Yeah, but like I had like summer jobs and stuff like this, so like I'm not saying I never bought books, but just like working full time meant that I had money, which meant that I could afford to buy books if I wanted to. So obviously I bought more books, therefore I read more books. Equally, commuting to work means that I read more books, because if I didn't have, like now, I have like a 45-minute each way minimum commute. So that's like an hour and a half every day I read. And then I also read before bed. So like, partly, I do think that Booktube has made me read more, yes. I do also think that just being an adult has made me read more, because I have more of this disposable time, whereas previously, if I had all this disposable time, I would like be using it to study and like do essays and stuff. That said, I think Booktube has kind of changed the types of things I read, but in a good way. I think I am more plugged into contemporary stuff than I used to be, which I like, but I do also still read a lot of weird stuff. Essentially, I think Booktube has made me more aware of like, what's being published this year, like what are maybe some publishing trends, like just more like analytic of what's happening in the publishing world. I have more awareness of, which is really interesting. That doesn't always translate into what I actually read. I don't read like new releases all the time. I tend to read like quite varied, but I don't know, I think Booktube has just opened my eyes to just like so many more books. I think as well, because I make videos about the books that I read, it means that when I'm reading books, I'm not just reading them, I'm thinking about them, I'm considering them, I'm being like, okay, I'm feeling this way about this book, but like, why am I feeling this way about it? What has made this happen? And I really like that it's not that I read more books than I used to, but they're just like in and they're out. It's like I read more books than I used to, and I'm thinking and considering about all of them. And even if I only talk about them briefly in a wrap-up, like, I've still had to like pause and take a moment and be like, okay, what do I think? And I like that. I like that I'm not just, it's not that I read more and that's wonderful, it's that I am having a more nuanced experience with my reading, and then also seeing how other people approach wrap-ups and approach their reading and stuff like that. It's just really useful, because sometimes people talk about like reviewing a book in a certain way, and it opens up a new angle of like considering things and stuff. So I just think I just think that making Booktube videos and being a part of Booktube has just made me engage with my reading more, and I think that's really good. So previously I would engage with my reading because I would be doing essays on the topics, whereas now it's like, hey, let's have a chat. But I like that, that's cool. I'm going to call it a day because I think this video's probably got quite long. I'm not going to tag anyone because I feel like we're already in 2020 and I don't know if anyone else would like to do this, but if you would like to do this, please do it, and then let me know that you've done it, and I'd love to see your video. I am running out of voice, so I'm going to go, and I hope you have a really lovely day, and I'll see you next time for something different.